and thank you for joining our Analyst Viewpoint series of videos. My name's Andy White, I'm Chief Marketing Officer at Numara Software. We're a leading provider of IT operations management software for medium to large enterprises, serving over 55,000 customer sites worldwide, who in turn are managing over 20 million IT assets. Joining me today is David Johnson, Senior Analyst for Desktop and Mobile Infrastructure and Operations at Forrester Research. And in this series, we'll be discussing 6 topics relating to IT operations management. These topics are going to cover the issues facing organizations both commercially and technically in virtualization, service management, cloud computing, asset and lifecycle management, the exploding world of mobile device management and the wider consumerization of IT. And we'll be concluding with a security and vulnerability video. David, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Andy. It's a pleasure.
So in this section of Analyst Viewpoint, I'd like to cover the topic on the minds of many CIOs and IT directors. That is, how do I manage my mobile estate? And in many cases, it's actually not my mobile estate, it's mobile devices coming into my environment. Now, clearly, this is not a new challenge, but one that's been an issue for many companies. And how are they starting to deal with that, and why is it still an issue today?
That's a good question. The biggest reason is the rate of change. We've seen a tremendous diversity in platforms and device styles come into the organization in just the last few years.
Right.
And these companies have set up their operations around desktops and end-user computing on one platform. And so this diversity now is kind of throwing that into chaos. And so that's why it's a challenge, is that diversity. Yeah.
So how can an effective MDM or mobile device management strategy and MDM tool set improve IT operations from a process or cost perspective?
Yeah, that's a good question. Think about it this way. As these devices come in, you face a choice. You can either try and help people individually through the configuration of each one of those devices. And if you have 5,000 people in the organization,
That's a lot of work.
that's going to be labor intensive.
Right.
And so a tool set will help you, first of all, automate the things that people are calling the service desk about, but more importantly, be proactive so eventually they won't have to call.
I mean, we've certainly found that the inbound calls into our customers' service desks have moved from, hey, I've forgotten my password, to what's the wireless access code, or how do I connect to Microsoft Exchange? Is that something you're finding in your research as well?
Absolutely, absolutely. It's people are looking for help with getting these things working in the corporate environment to the best extent that they can, and so that's where these are coming from.
So it's not just the inventory of what and where are these devices, it's the configuration and access into the IT system. And I assume that goes into the management and security of these devices as well. I guess they're a bit of a liability.
That's fair. The first is always the configuration and rollout. Second comes the inventory and security and other things. And those are being sorted out. What do you find when you work with your customers?
Yeah, well, we've typically found that people actually don't know who's connecting to the services and what information they're getting access to. And I think one of the challenges our customers are facing is how do they get a control of who is accessing the technology, the information, and who should have access to it, and what happens when you lose one of these devices? How do you secure or wipe the information access? And do you find companies are approaching their mobile operator to provide these services, or independent software vendors to resolve their mobile device management challenges? What do you see going on?
Mostly companies are internalizing this. You know, the main reason is the configuration for every company's environment is going to be slightly different. There also may be cases where they begin to take advantage of this for sales operations and other things which may be specific to the organization. They want to roll out materials and so on. And so that's a very personal thing that is probably not the domain of a carrier to do.
We've certainly found that the end user of this technology doesn't really care. It's just my email isn't working, or I can't get access to my device, and therefore it needs to be part of the wider IT management. So do you see customers seeing this as just an access device to information, or is it linked to applications development and new demands on the organization for mobile applications as well as information access?
That's a good angle, an interesting question. We're definitely seeing these being used in ways to improve customer relationships. Sales reps will take these out and have a very personal discussion with a customer. And that's an interesting change, and so that's an added dimension over what had come before. They're also, the way that people consume information on these devices is not the same way that we may consume it on a PC.
Right.
They're using rich apps, and they're using they're reading materials and so on these devices, and so the content distribution and the rich app internet, as we like to call it, is new. And it's changing the way people are working.
And that's going to be an interesting thing to watch. Now, you also mentioned, we've been used to this world of PC management and locking down and controlling and putting discipline and rigor in managing that world. Is the mobile world leveraging or being controlled by that IT discipline?
I think that the end users are moving in a different direction than IT. I think that as IT has increased their control, increased their rigor, around putting, the management and security policies and everything on the PC, it's been an incentive for people to break out of that because they find themselves boxed in. They don't have the freedom to install new applications to be more productive, things like that. I think that's driving consumerization. There's a lot of frustration there. So that's a big element.
From an operating system perspective, what are you seeing happening? Who are the winners and losers in the mobile war?
Yeah, that's a fair question. The installed base numbers right now on smartphones and tablets are two very different things. The tablets we're finding, iOS is dominant right now, and on the smartphones, Apple has given up some market share to Android. But the leading indicator that's interesting is preference. And the majority of people are still preferring the iOS on tablet devices, for example. And so that's a good indicator of what's to come.
And I guess that's endemic of this world that we're facing of BYOD, bring your own device, that the IT managers are having to deal with, that they're not making many of the decisions now. They're being brought in by consumers. And is that something you're seeing in your research?
Yes, and I'd say that that's an understatement. I think the end user community in many companies is overruling the hierarchy right now actively. And that's presenting challenges because, again, these infrastructures and tools and processes were all set up around this monolithic thing, and that's changing.
So as far as information security is concerned, what's the most important piece of functionality an MDM platform or tool set needs to be delivering? Is it security centric or is it information access centric?
That's evolving pretty quickly, and I think in the future we're going to see some use cases that I can speak to. In the short term, the most important thing is security of the device once it disappears. If somebody loses it, they leave it in a taxi cab, we have to make sure that we're not leaving company assets out there that are private for somebody to get to. Things
so
like
remote wipe.
Yes, remote wipe and enforcing the passcode restrictions, things like that are very important. And that's number one. In the future, I think we'll see security move from the device to the information itself. We'll begin restricting and encrypting files and things, and making sure that even if files find their way out into the wild, that they'll be protected.
The other interesting thing that we found of interest was, I think by 2013 there are going to be more mobile operating system shipments than traditional operating management systems, and that's going to have a marked impact on our business. Is there any preferred delivery model for mobile device management platforms? I mean, obviously you can do all of this work yourself and install it on-premise, but do you see cloud-based MDM services accelerating?
I think so. It's going to depend on the amount of customization that's needed. Certainly some activities for mobile device management, maybe auto-enrollment, auto-lock, and things like that can be done from a SaaS-based service. But there may be others, such as packaging of applications and things that are not as easily done from a SaaS-based service and still need to be done with local tools.
So I guess this is kind of linked with the dramatic growth we're seeing in the wider SaaS cloud application management market acceleration, that IT wants to remove some of the back office administration of setting up an SMS server and all of the certification servers, and let your SaaS provider do that so that they can focus on the task at hand, managing the mobile devices.
They become service brokers.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Dave Johnson for Forrester Research, thank you for joining us today. As we mentioned, we have 6 of these videos. They're available at numarasoftware.com. We welcome you to go and take a look at the content within our website. I'm Andy White for Numara Software.